The rust-red sky of Zilara loomed ominously above James Ross as he stumbled out of the landing pod, his legs heavy, still acclimating to the odd gravity that weighed him down just slightly more than Earth's. He could hear the hum of the pod powering down behind him, its engines whirring to a near silence as if sealing his fate. The dense, violet-hued forest stretched endlessly before him, each twisted branch and alien leaf seeming to pulse with a life of its own. This was no ordinary forest, he thought. It felt alive, attentive, as if it were watching him. A voice crackled over his earpiece, startling him. "Ross, do you copy? This is your final transmission from Earth. You are now on your own." The voice of the Earth Interplanetary Authority officer was indifferent, businesslike. They hadn't even given him time to speak in his defense. His crime, a supposed breach of protocol during an intergalactic mission, was a sentence he still didn't fully understand. All he knew was that he had been marked as a scapegoat, and now he was here on Zilara, light years from home. With a sigh, Ross glanced around, surveying his surroundings. Despite the eeriness, he couldn't help but be struck by the planet's peculiar beauty. Vines as thick as tree trunks wove around ancient, towering stone pillars, etched with strange symbols, their surfaces glowing faintly in the dimming light. He crouched beside one, tracing a finger over the symbols, wondering who had made them, and when. His silent contemplation was interrupted by a sound, a faint rustle. Ross straightened, his heart quickening, eyes scanning the shadows around him. "Who's there?" he called out, his voice steady but his pulse racing. Silence answered him, but then came a whisper, barely audible but distinctly feminine. He couldn't make out the words, only the haunting melody of the language. He turned, and there, standing between two massive trees, was an alien woman. Her skin glowed faintly, a soft pearlescent shimmer in the fading light, and her eyes, large, iridescent like polished stones, watched him with an intense curiosity. Ross cleared his throat, unsure of how to address her, and raised his hand in what he hoped was a non-threatening gesture. I come in peace. I'm James Ross. Just Ross is fine." The woman's lips moved slightly, as if mimicking the sound. "Ross?" "Yes," he replied, surprised. Her voice was unlike anything he had heard, a soft hum, almost like a song. He took a step forward, noting how she seemed to tense, her eyes narrowing. Another rustle echoed from the shadows, and two more figures stepped out, similar to the first, each of them adorned in robes woven from iridescent, thread-like materials that caught the light in dazzling displays of purple, green, and silver. He was surrounded now, 3 alien women observing him like a specimen under a microscope. One of them, taller than the others and adorned with a faintly glowing amulet around her neck, spoke in a more commanding tone. "You are different. Male," she said, her accent thick, but the words surprisingly clear. Ross nodded slowly. "Yes, male. I come from Earth. I was sent here," he explained, unsure if they would even understand him. "Earth," the taller one repeated, her brow furrowing as if testing the foreign word. She exchanged a glance with the others, her expression a mixture of interest and skepticism. "We have only stories of males," she said finally, each word carefully pronounced, as if they had been stored in some ancient memory. "Long ago, there were some here, but not for many cycles." The first woman who had appeared stepped forward, her eyes fixed intently on Ross. She seemed younger than the others, though with these aliens age was impossible to judge. "You come. Why?" "Why?" Ross hesitated, unsure of how to explain his situation. "I didn't have a choice," he replied slowly. "I was exiled, sent here, as a punishment." The women looked at each other again, this time with something approaching amusement. The younger one's mouth curved into a slight smile, her gaze flickering over him with a curious intensity. "Exiled," she repeated. "Yet you are needed." "Needed?" Ross frowned, glancing between them. I don't understand. I'm no one important. The one with the amulet shook her head slowly. All who come are important, Ross. To be here means purpose. Ross took a steadying breath. Look, I don't know what you think my purpose is. I was just a technician back on Earth. I don't know why I was sent here, and I don't know what you want from me. The young woman tilted her head, eyes widening slightly. You are first of your kind in long time. Our people know only the stories. She reached out, hesitated, then let her hand fall as if caught between curiosity and caution. Tell us of your world. Ross wasn't sure where to start. His mind raced with the chaos of his recent exile, his failed defense back on Earth, and the strange journey to this distant world. He took a breath, deciding to keep things simple. My world, it's blue, mostly. Lots of water, lots of people. We have cities, machines. The taller one raised an eyebrow. Machines? Things that do work for us, he explained, feeling foolish under their scrutiny. Make life easier. The young woman gave a faint nod, her gaze softening. Here, we work. With the land. With each other. No machines. Is it peaceful here? He asked, not entirely sure he wanted to know the answer. The women exchanged looks, and the amulet wearer's expression grew distant. Peaceful and for a long time, but your arrival stirs something. Her eyes bore into his with an intensity that made Ross shift uncomfortably. There was a prophecy of a man who would return, bring change. Ross let out a bitter laugh before he could stop himself. A prophecy, huh? Look, I'm no hero. I was just sent here to be forgotten. The younger woman's gaze sharpened, her curiosity undimmed. Perhaps you are more than you know, Ross of Earth. Perhaps this forgetting has meaning. He looked around at the darkening forest, feeling the weight of their stares, the sense of expectation in the air. Whatever these women believed, they had ideas about him, ideas that were dangerous, maybe even impossible. He knew he'd have to tread carefully here. Maybe, he said finally, meeting the young woman's eyes. But until I figure it out, maybe you could just show me around? Help me understand this place? After a moment's pause, she inclined her head. Follow, she replied simply, and with that, she turned, leading him deeper into the alien wilderness, the others following close behind. As they walked, he couldn't shake the strange feeling that each step was taking him closer to something inescapable, something that felt both daunting and inevitable. They led Ross through the alien forest, moving with an effortless grace that made him feel clumsy by comparison. The trees, tall and sinuous, arched overhead like watchful guardians, their branches twisting together to form a canopy that filtered the dusky light into strange, shifting patterns. The forest floor was littered with phosphorescent flowers that glowed faintly underfoot, illuminating their path. The woman with the amulet, whom Ross had come to think of as the leader, turned back to glance at him occasionally, as if ensuring he hadn't slipped away or vanished. The younger woman, however, watched him with a different intensity, her eyes flickering over him with an almost childlike curiosity, as if she couldn't quite believe he was real. What do you call this place? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper as he tried to match their silent footfalls. The leader paused, her head tilting as though considering the question. It is Kalthara, she replied softly, her voice a faint echo in the forest. The heart of Zilara. Ross nodded, though the words held a weight he couldn't fully grasp. He wanted to ask more, but the silence between them felt delicate, like a fragile bridge. Instead, he let his gaze wander, absorbing the strange beauty around him. Ross, the young woman suddenly spoke up, her voice lilting with interest. Why do you wear that? She pointed to his wrist, where his Earth Standard communicator and data bracelet blinked with dim, steady lights. This? he replied, lifting his arm for her to see. It's a tool. It can track where I am, record information, and sometimes even speak to me. He paused, realizing how strange that sounded. The young woman's eyes widened, a spark of fascination lighting up her face. Your tools speak? She whispered, glancing at the leader, who regarded the device with a more guarded expression. Not really speak, Ross clarified quickly, realizing he'd lost them in translation. But it can relay messages from others, from far away. He hesitated. Well, it used to. Now it's just a reminder of where I came from. The leader's gaze softened, her violet eyes clouding with an understanding that surprised him. The past is heavy, she murmured, as though speaking to herself. But Zilara demands presence. Here, we live by what is seen, felt, known. He couldn't help but feel a strange pang at her words. He'd been trying so hard to keep his past alive in his mind, his home, his old life, even the injustice that had sent him here. But her words made him question if clinging to it was worth the wait. A few moments later, they arrived at a clearing where massive stones jutted up from the ground in a circular formation, each one etched with the same glowing symbols he had seen earlier. It looked almost like an ancient gathering place, a place of reverence. The leader moved to the center of the circle, turning to face him. The others stayed along the edges, their eyes fixed on Ross as though waiting for something monumental to happen. This is our place of knowing, the leader announced, her voice echoing across the stones. Our elders say it holds memories of the first of those who once walked among us. Ross felt a chill run down his spine. The first? You mean males? He ventured, his voice dropping to a murmur. The leader nodded solemnly, her gaze never wavering. Yes, in ages past, we were not as we are now. There was balance, a union of energies that kept our world whole. But that time passed, and so did they. Ross took a step closer, unable to tear his eyes from the glowing stones. What happened to them? They left, or they faded. We do not know, the younger woman answered softly, as if the words were both truth and myth woven together. But it is said that one would return in our time of unraveling. Ross frowned, feeling the weight of their words settle heavily over him. Unraveling? The leader's gaze darkened. Zilara has remained still for centuries, yet we feel the shift. The forests are growing quieter, the ground colder. The air carries whispers, warnings. She stepped closer, her voice barely a whisper. Your arrival, Ross, marks the beginning of something unknown. Ross swallowed, feeling a tightening in his chest. He hadn't come here to fulfill prophecies or destinies. He was an exile, an outcast. He didn't want to be a harbinger or a catalyst for something he didn't understand. You think I'm supposed to change things here? He asked, struggling to keep his voice steady. The leader held his gaze, her expression inscrutable. We do not know, but we are here to learn. She gestured to the stones, her voice taking on a formal tone. Stand here, Ross. Let the stones know you. Apprehensive but compelled by their intensity, he stepped into the center of the circle. As soon as his feet touched the ground within the stones, he felt an odd warmth radiating from the earth beneath him. The symbols on the stones glowed brighter, casting ethereal light that bathed him in an otherworldly glow. The young woman approached, her gaze transfixed on him. Tell us what you feel. Ross took a breath, trying to push down his unease. It's warm, like something alive, but sleeping. The leader nodded approvingly. The stones remember, Ross. They sense echoes of the past. He looked around, feeling the silence press in on him. For a moment, he imagined he could hear faint voices, like whispers in the wind. Are you saying the stones are alive? They are part of Zilara, the leader replied simply. All things here are connected. Ross was about to question her further when he felt a sudden jolt of energy shoot up through his legs. He staggered, barely managing to keep his balance as a wave of images flooded his mind. He saw glimpses of tall figures with shimmering skin and fierce eyes, warriors of some ancient time, standing in these very stones. He saw flashes of battles, moments of peace, strange rituals he could barely comprehend. And then he saw himself, standing alone, just as he was now, surrounded by the alien women, their eyes fixed on him with reverence and fear. He gasped, stumbling back, his heart racing as the visions faded. What was that? The leader approached him, her face calm but her eyes sharp with curiosity. The stones remember you, Ross. They know your spirit, as they knew those before you. I'm not like them, he protested, his voice barely above a whisper. I don't belong here. The younger woman stepped forward, placing a gentle hand on his arm. Her touch was warm, steadying. Perhaps you do not belong, she said softly. But you are here, and that is enough. Ross looked at her, feeling a strange sense of comfort in her words. There was something hauntingly genuine about these women, something that made him want to trust them, even if he didn't understand why. What now? He asked, his voice quieter, his resolve softening. The leader exchanged a glance with the younger woman, who gave a faint nod before stepping back. Now, you learn, she replied, gesturing toward the forest path beyond the clearing. We will teach you of Zilara, and in time perhaps you will teach us of yourself. Ross took a breath, nodding slowly. All right. Show me. They began to lead him deeper into the forest, their footsteps barely making a sound as they moved through the thick foliage. The air was cooler here, filled with the scents of strange flowers and damp earth. He could feel their presence around him, steady and vigilant, like silent guardians. As they walked, the young woman slowed her pace until she was walking alongside him. Her eyes glinted with unspoken questions, and he could see the edges of a smile on her lips. Tell me of Earth, she said, her voice soft but eager. What is it like? Ross hesitated, unsure of where to start. Earth is different. It's full of people, technology, noise. There's life everywhere, but it's not always peaceful. Not peaceful? She repeated, her brow furrowing. Why would a world so full lack peace? He shrugged, a bit ashamed to admit it. Sometimes, when there's too much, people forget how to live together. They fight over many things. She seemed to ponder this, her gaze distant. We do not know fighting as you describe, she said, almost to herself. Only the ritual and the balance. The balance? He asked, curious. She nodded, her eyes meeting his. Here, all things must exist in harmony. Our lives, our land, it is a cycle, a balance. Without it, we would unravel. As her words echoed in his mind, Ross felt the weight of his exile lessen, if only slightly. Perhaps he didn't belong here, perhaps he never would, but something in the depths of Zilara called to him. It was as though the planet itself was whispering secrets, inviting him to listen. And for the first time since his arrival, he found himself wanting to know. Days turned into weeks, and Ross found himself growing accustomed to the rhythms of Zilara. The air seemed to pulse with life, each sound, each scent, part of an intricate pattern he was slowly beginning to decipher. The women of Zilara taught him their ways with a quiet patience. They showed him how to recognize the songs of the trees, how to read the signs in the sky, and how to move in harmony with the world around him. Each day was filled with learning, and each lesson seemed to draw him deeper into Zilara's mysteries. But tonight was different. The air felt charged as the women gathered around a large fire, their faces flickering in the shifting orange glow. Their expressions were somber, and the usual whispers of laughter were replaced by an uneasy silence. Ross stood near the edge, watching, waiting, his heart pounding with anticipation. Tonight, the leader announced, her voice clear and unwavering, we call upon the spirit of Zilara. We seek its guidance, its protection. Ross glanced around, trying to gauge what this ritual might mean. He had seen smaller ceremonies, gatherings where they would chant and move in sync with one another. But this felt more serious, as if something was pressing down upon them, a tension that lay just beneath the surface. The young woman, Ayla, whom he'd come to trust the most, stepped forward, her gaze meeting his. "Ross, you are the key tonight," she said softly, her voice trembling. "Zilara has spoken, and it is through you that we must find our path." "The key?" he repeated, confusion mingling with apprehension. "Ayla, I don't understand. I thought I was just learning." The leader raised her hand, silencing him. "You were chosen by the stones, Ross. They recognized you, an outsider with roots from another world. We have waited. We have waited for someone like you for many, many generations." Ross's pulse quickened. "Waited for me? For what?" She gestured for him to step into the circle, her violet eyes burning with intensity. "Zilara is unraveling, Ross. The balance we once held is slipping from our grasp. The trees grow weaker, the land quieter. We cannot hold this world together. Not alone." A murmur rippled through the women gathered around him, their faces shadowed with worry and anticipation. Ross looked to Ayla, searching her expression for some reassurance, but she only nodded, her eyes holding a strange mixture of hope and sadness. "What am I supposed to do?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. The leader took his hands, her grip surprisingly strong. "You must let go, Ross. You must give yourself to Zilara. Entirely." He felt a chill race down his spine. "Give myself? What does that mean?" Ayla stepped closer, her voice barely audible. "You carry the memory of another world, another way of being, the essence of Earth, its fire, its defiance, its resilience. Zilara needs that. She needs you to breathe that life into her once more." Ross swallowed, his mind spinning. They spoke of him as if he were some kind of savior, some chosen one meant to bridge two worlds. But he was only a man, an exile, sent here against his will. "You don't understand," he began, his voice wavering. "I'm no hero. I didn't come here to save anyone. I was sent here to be forgotten." The leader's gaze softened, a flicker of sympathy crossing her face. "Perhaps that is why you were chosen, Ross. Only one who has been cast aside, who has nothing to lose, can give everything. We do not ask this lightly. But Zilara, she is dying. And if you do not act, we all will fade with her." He looked around at their faces, the hope, the fear, the trust they had placed in him, a man they barely knew. And in that moment, he felt the weight of their belief settle over him, grounding him, binding him to this world in a way he hadn't expected. Taking a deep breath, he nodded. What do I have to do?" Ayla took his hand, her fingers warm against his skin. "Come," she whispered, guiding him toward the heart of the clearing where the fire burned brightest. The women began to chant, their voices weaving together in a haunting, rhythmic melody. The leader took a pouch from her robes, scattering a handful of shimmering powder into the flames. The fire surged, casting a strange, unearthly glow over the clearing. "Stand here, Ross," the leader instructed, guiding him to a small, circular stone embedded in the earth. "Close your eyes. Open yourself to Zilara. Let her feel your spirit." He closed his eyes, focusing on the sound of the chant, the warmth of the fire, the weight of Ayla's hand on his shoulder. Slowly, he felt himself drifting, as if he were sinking into the earth, his consciousness blurring at the edges. And then he felt it, a presence, vast and ancient, stirring deep within the ground beneath him. It was as if the entire planet had awakened, and he was standing at the center of its awareness. His heart pounded, and he fought the urge to pull back, to retreat from the overwhelming force pressing against him. "Ross," Ayla's voice whispered in his mind, her words somehow reaching him across the void. "Do not fear. Let Zilara in. Let her know you." He took a shaky breath, opening himself, letting the presence flow into him. Images flashed before his eyes, memories of Earth, of the people he had left behind, of the life he had once known. He felt Zilara absorbing each memory, each emotion, as if drinking in the essence of his world. And then, something shifted. He felt a warmth spreading through him, a gentle pulsing rhythm that seemed to align with the beat of his heart. It was as if Zilara herself was breathing through him, her life force merging with his own. A wave of energy surged through his body and he gasped, feeling as if he were on fire. But it wasn't pain he felt. It was a raw, boundless vitality, a power that seemed to resonate with every cell in his being. The chanting grew louder, faster, and he felt the women's presence surrounding him, their energy merging with his, amplifying the connection. The ground beneath him trembled, and he sensed a change, a stirring deep within the planet, as if something dormant had begun to awaken. Ross. Ayla's voice echoed in his mind, filled with wonder and awe. You are the bridge. You have given Zilara the breath she needs to survive. He opened his eyes, his vision hazy, his body humming with energy. The women were watching him, their faces filled with reverence and joy. The leader stepped forward, placing a hand on his shoulder. Zilara is reborn, she whispered, because of you. Ross looked down at his hands, still feeling the strange warmth coursing through him. He was different now, changed in a way he couldn't fully understand. He had become part of this world, bound to it in a way that went beyond words. But as he looked into Ayla's eyes, he realized that he was no longer alone. He was part of something greater, something that transcended the boundaries of Earth and Zilara. In this place, among these people, he had found a purpose, a home. As the fire flickered, casting shadows over the clearing, Ross felt a sense of peace settle over him. He was no longer an exile, no longer a man without a place. Here, in the heart of Zilara, he had found his true calling, and with that realization, he knew that his journey had only just begun.
Liora shifted uncomfortably in her human clothes, a fabric blend that felt stifling yet oddly comforting in its texture. Earth, with its sprawling cities, seemed alien and impossibly chaotic to her. And yet, the chaotic pulse of this world, the inexplicable hum of life weaving through the streets, whispered in the laughter of strangers and scattered across the twinkling city lights, drew her in. She stood alone in a small cafe, fingers hovering over a ceramic mug of what the humans called coffee, feeling the weight of her isolation. Her mission was simple in theory: observe human behavior, catalog her findings, and report back to her superiors on Nerith, her home planet. The humans fascinated her, particularly their customs around reproduction, a bizarre ritual involving an intricate dance of emotions she couldn't quite grasp. "Mind if I join you?" The voice startled her, pulling her from her thoughts. She glanced up and saw a young man standing beside her table, his gaze warm, yet curious. A slight smile played on his lips, and Liora noticed his open posture, an unspoken invitation. She nodded cautiously, her eyes studying his every movement as he took the seat across from her. "Thank you," he said, settling in with a hint of hesitance. "You look kind of lost in thought." Liora tilted her head, searching for the correct response. "I am considering," she said carefully, picking each word with a slight accent, more formal than what humans around her seemed to use. "The concept of relationships, I think." He raised his eyebrows, surprised but intrigued. "Really? That's an interesting topic to think about over coffee." "Yes." Her gaze was unwavering, intense. She could feel his confusion, the slight unease as he looked back at her. Her expression softened, something she'd learned helped humans feel at ease, and extended her hand, just as she'd read about in human books. "I am Liora." He took her hand, chuckling as he gave it a gentle shake. "Evan." "Nice to meet you, Liora." As they exchanged pleasantries, she noted the small shifts in his face, the subtle changes that hinted at humor, warmth, or puzzlement. She studied every nuance with clinical interest, but Evan's gaze lingered on her, clearly intrigued. "So, relationships?" he prompted, bringing her focus back. What exactly are you interested in? Her mind raced through the questions she had meticulously prepared but hesitated to ask. Despite her studies, she felt unprepared for the intensity of this interaction. I am conducting research, she said, choosing her words carefully. Humans seem to find closeness very important. There is a desire to be with another. He smiled, leaning back in his chair. That's one way of putting it. Most people like to have someone special in their lives, yeah. But it's more than just being with someone. It's about connection, understanding each other. Understanding? She leaned forward, a spark of curiosity flashing in her eyes. You mean there is more than the physical element? Evan laughed, not unkindly. You make it sound like a lab experiment. She hesitated, realizing she'd perhaps taken the wrong approach. I do not experience emotions the same way, she murmured, glancing down. Evan's face softened as he nodded slowly, sensing a vulnerability in her confession. So, you're not really from around here, huh? Leora hesitated before nodding. No, not exactly. She chose her next words carefully. Where I come from, relationships are pragmatic. Functional? Evan raised his eyebrows, intrigued. Pragmatic? Yes. Connections are transactional. We do not form bonds for enjoyment or closeness. She paused, her expression shifting as she searched for the right description. Here, humans seem to need closeness. The concept of love is elusive to me. Love is elusive to everyone, he replied with a smile. But, yeah, I'd say it's a pretty big deal for most of us. She leaned back, studying him as though he were a puzzle piece she couldn't quite place. Do you have experience with love? Then, Evan blinked, her straightforward question catching him off guard. Yeah, I guess you could say that. Is well complicated? He chuckled. I think most people are still figuring it out. She noted the slight flush on his cheeks and the way his voice softened. Humans were guarded about these topics, she realized. Yet, there was a longing there, an unspoken invitation she couldn't ignore. Can you tell me more? She asked quietly. About how it feels? Evan exhaled, glancing down at his mug. He hesitated, as if carefully selecting his words. It's like having a part of yourself outside of your body. You care about that person's happiness as much as, or more than, your own. They can make you feel whole, but also vulnerable. Vulnerable? She repeated the word slowly, feeling its weight on her tongue. You mean you risk pain? Yes, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. But that's part of what makes it real. Leora sat in silence, absorbing his words. This vulnerability, this exchange of trust and risk, it fascinated her. Nerathians didn't expose themselves to such uncertainty. Emotions were controlled, regulated, treated like commodities. But here was Evan, speaking of emotions as though they were vital, as though they held a magic she'd never known. Would you show me then? The words left her lips before she had fully processed them. Evan looked up, surprised. Show you? Yes, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. If it is permissible, she could see his hesitation, a mixture of curiosity and caution crossing his face. I don't think love is something you can just demonstrate like a science experiment, he replied gently. It's something you have to feel. Then, can I ask you questions? She ventured, her tone more vulnerable than she intended. A faint smile tugged at the corners of his mouth as he nodded. All right, ask away. She leaned in, her voice barely a whisper, as if what she was about to ask required an unspoken trust. Why do humans value closeness so deeply, even when it causes suffering? Evan studied her, a flicker of understanding dawning in his eyes. Maybe because it's part of what makes us human. Love gives life meaning, even if it's hard sometimes. This puzzled her. Meaning, a concept her people seldom entertained. Meaning, she repeated, rolling the word around, testing it like a new flavor on her tongue. Yeah, he said, shrugging lightly. I mean, why do you do what you do? Your research, to learn, to understand, she replied without hesitation. My people find value in knowledge, not emotions. Well, for us, emotions are part of what makes life worth living. He leaned forward, voice quiet. Sometimes, understanding and emotions aren't as separate as you think. She fell silent, the weight of his words settling heavily within her. Emotions as knowledge, a baffling concept, and yet she could sense its truth. Her gaze drifted to his hand, resting on the table, and an unfamiliar impulse stirred within her, the desire to reach out, to bridge the gap between them. Do you think, her voice wavered, barely audible, do you think I could learn what it means? Evan's smile was warm, encouraging. If you're open to it, yeah. But it's a journey. One you don't have to rush. A journey, she murmured, the words sinking in her mind like a seed. She felt something unfamiliar, like the faint echo of warmth. For the first time, she wondered if this strange human experience might hold more depth than she could comprehend. Leora found herself wandering the city beside Evan more often than she intended, her initial plans for detached observation slipping through her fingers like sand. With each encounter, she felt her curiosity intensify, no longer confined to her mission, but pulled inexorably toward the man who had, by chance, become her guide. Their latest meeting took them to a quiet park in the middle of the city. The sounds of earth filled the space around them. Birds calling, leaves rustling in the breeze, the laughter of children playing nearby. It was disorienting yet oddly comforting, and the atmosphere seemed to make Evan's expression softer, as if he, too, was at ease in this simple, earthy environment. You know, I've been thinking about your question, Evan said, glancing at her with a small smile. Leora tilted her head. Which one? The one about why we risk so much for love? He chuckled, rubbing the back of his neck. It's not exactly something you can answer in a sentence or two. Then explain it to me slowly, she replied, feeling her own voice soften in response to his tone. Tell me why you think love is worth pain. Evan's gaze grew distant, as though he were searching through memories. I think when you're with someone you love, it's like you're more than yourself. They become part of you, even if you don't realize it. So losing them hurts because it feels like a part of you is missing. She nodded, processing his words, her focus unwavering. So love is losing a piece of oneself? He chuckled, shaking his head. Not exactly. Love is more about sharing. You gain something too. It's about finding joy in another person's happiness, feeling understood without words. He shrugged. Hard to put into words, honestly. It's something you feel deep down. His answer left her silent, grappling with the implications. A quiet thrill accompanied the mystery of it, a hidden truth that, despite her scientific training, she couldn't dissect or quantify. A cool breeze stirred, carrying with it the scent of flowers, fresh and light. Evan turned to her, his eyes curious. Leora, do your people not experience anything like that? No, she replied quietly. For us, connection is based on function, not feeling. Bonds are only made when necessary, and always temporary. Evan frowned, his expression almost sorrowful. Doesn't that get lonely? Lonely. The word struck her with unexpected force. She hadn't considered it before. I don't know, she admitted. I never thought of it as a choice. His expression softened as he watched her, and for the first time, she detected a touch of sympathy in his gaze, something gentle and unspoken. Maybe that's why you came here, to understand the other side. Perhaps. Her voice was softer than she'd intended, and she quickly cleared her throat, forcing herself to return to her usual composed tone. But it is complex. They walked in silence for a while, the sounds of the city fading into the background. Evan seemed content to let the quiet settle between them, yet she could feel his presence, steady, grounding. Her curiosity stirred again, and she decided to press forward. Can you explain, she hesitated, searching for the right words, what humans feel in close moments? Evan glanced at her, and she sensed the sudden tension in his posture. Close moments? He repeated, his voice gentle but wary. Yes, she said, tilting her head. When humans engage in reproduction, you mentioned that it is more than a physical act. His cheeks reddened slightly, and he laughed, a sound that was both awkward and amused. Well, you don't hold back, do you? I am simply curious. She kept her tone even, hoping to disguise the strange, nervous flutter that had taken hold of her. If I am to understand humans, I must know about all aspects of your lives. Right, he murmured, rubbing his chin as he considered her question. Okay, well, for us, it's not just a biological process. It's a way of sharing something deeply personal, something intimate. Being close to someone isn't just about the physical part. It's about feeling safe, connected. The idea left her momentarily speechless. Her people's rituals were devoid of intimacy. Yet here, humans place such importance on something so fleeting. She opened her mouth to ask another question, but hesitated, unsure if the words would come out correctly. Have you ever felt that close to someone? She asked, voice barely above a whisper. Evan met her gaze, his expression thoughtful. Once, a while back, he replied softly, his eyes distant. It didn't end well, though. A pang of something unfamiliar tightened in her chest. I'm sorry. He shrugged, smiling a little. It's part of life. Heartbreak, love, all of it. You learn, you grow. He studied her, his expression turning serious. It's not something you can learn from a textbook, though. The intensity in his gaze unnerved her, as if he could see past her composed exterior. I want to learn, she replied, surprising herself with the quiet urgency in her voice. Not just a theory. Evan seemed to consider this, his gaze flickering with something unreadable. He took a step closer, and she felt a strange warmth spread through her as he lowered his voice. Then maybe you don't need answers, he murmured, his gaze lingering on her face. Maybe you just need to experience it. Her pulse quickened, and she felt the sudden urge to look away, but his eyes held her captive. Experience it? How? He let out a slow breath, and for a moment, she could see his own hesitation, his own vulnerability. Maybe start with something simple. She swallowed, sensing the shift in his tone, the unspoken invitation. Show me, she whispered, barely aware of the words leaving her lips. Evan's hand moved to hers, his touch light and cautious. His fingers traced a delicate line along her skin, and she shivered, caught off guard by the sensation. It was subtle, gentle, yet it felt as though a surge of energy had sparked between them. Humans feel things differently, he said, his voice hushed. Sometimes it's the little things, a touch, a glance, a word. He paused, his gaze meeting hers. Emotions can be powerful, even in the smallest gestures. The weight of his words pressed into her, filling her with a mix of wonder and fear. She hadn't anticipated this intensity, this raw vulnerability that came with each gesture, each look. Evan, she breathed, the name slipping from her lips without thought. It was the first time she had addressed him so directly, and the sound of it in her own voice startled her. Yeah. His voice was barely audible, his attention fixed on her, as though she were a mystery he wanted to unravel. I don't understand everything, she admitted, feeling the walls of her detachment begin to crumble. But I want to. He nodded, his smile gentle and reassuring. That's all that matters, Leora. Just let yourself feel it. They stood in silence, their surroundings fading into a blur as she focused on his presence. For the first time, she allowed herself to let go, to let the unfamiliar emotions wash over her, without resisting, without analyzing. Her hand tightened around his, and she felt a strange, dizzying warmth flood through her, as though she were stepping into a world she'd never known. Leora, he murmured, his gaze soft yet piercing. You're not just here to study us, are you? The question startled her, and she hesitated, uncertain of her answer. I don't know, she replied honestly. I thought I was. But now, he nodded, a knowing glint in his eyes. Maybe you're here to learn something else, something you can't find in any research report. As his words settled in, Leora felt a quiet resolution take root within her, a willingness to explore the unknown, to risk vulnerability in ways she'd never considered before. The boundaries of her mission blurred, and for the first time, she questioned the purpose of her journey, not as a scientist, but as something else. The days passed in a hazy rhythm, and with each encounter, Leora found herself drawn further from her mission and closer to Evan, even if she couldn't fully understand why. Their conversations were more than mere words. They were exchanges of pieces of themselves, revelations that left her questioning what she had once considered immutable truths. Each moment felt as if it hovered on the edge of discovery, one she sensed might change her forever. On this particular night, they were perched on a grassy hillside under a canopy of stars, the city lights a distant shimmer below. Evan had brought a blanket and a thermos of something warm, and they sat close, their shoulders touching. Leora found herself glancing at him often, each look betraying more of the inner turmoil that she tried to hide. "Leora," Evan began, breaking the silence, "I know you've got your reasons for being here, but have you ever thought about staying?" His voice was quiet, almost fragile, as though he feared the answer. The question lingered in the cool night air, stirring a mix of excitement and trepidation within her. "Stay?" she repeated, trying to mask the tremor in her voice. "Yeah," he said, a soft smile crossing his lips. "You know, on Earth, you could learn about us in a way that no report could ever capture." He hesitated, his gaze flickering over her, his expression vulnerable. "You don't have to leave." Leora's throat tightened as she looked away, focusing on the city lights. "It's complicated," she murmured, her tone evasive. But Evan leaned closer, his hand finding hers in the dark. "Try me?" She took a deep breath, her pulse quickening at the touch of his hand. "It's not just my research. My people, they would never understand this," she said, motioning between them. "We don't form bonds like this. Emotions are seen as a weakness, a distraction from our purpose." "But don't you think that's worth questioning?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Isn't there something more to life than just purpose?" The question struck her deeply, her carefully constructed rationale starting to crack under the weight of his words. She had always believed her existence was one of observation, free from emotional entanglements. Yet here she was, entangled in ways that defied all logic. "What would happen if you went back and told them?" Evan asked cautiously. She hesitated, the image of her superiors flashing in her mind. "They would never allow it. For them, emotions are dangerous." He nodded thoughtfully, his gaze turning serious. "And what about you? Do you think they're dangerous?" She looked down, her hand still in his, feeling the warmth of his skin against hers. "I don't know. I've never felt this way before." Their eyes met, and she sensed something shifting between them, a shared understanding, a quiet acceptance. And then, as if drawn by an invisible force, he leaned forward, his lips brushing against hers in a tentative, gentle kiss. The world fell away, leaving only the soft warmth of his touch, the unspoken connection that pulsed between them like a heartbeat. Her logical mind faltered, the rigid boundaries she had once held on to dissolving in the face of this new, unexplored feeling. When they pulled apart, her heart was racing, her thoughts a chaotic blur. "Evan," she whispered, her voice tinged with a mixture of wonder and fear. I don't know what's happening to me." He smiled softly, tucking a strand of her hair behind her ear. "You're just being human," he replied. "That's all." But as his words settled, a sudden tremor of alarm surged through her, a visceral reminder of the risk she was taking. The mission, her duty, her people, they would not look kindly upon this, and she realized, with a pang of dread, that her time was running out. "I have to go," she said abruptly, pulling away, her voice laced with urgency. "If they find out—" "Wait," Evan interjected, his brow furrowing. "Who's they?" "My people," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "They're watching. They always are." For the first time, she saw fear flicker in his eyes. "Leora, what are you saying?" She hesitated, knowing the next words would shatter the fragile connection they had forged. "I was sent here to observe, to study humans, particularly the bond between people. They thought it was a weakness, something exploitable." Evan's face paled, the hurt in his expression unmistakable. "So, all of this was just part of your experiments?" "No," she whispered, reaching for his hand. Not you." Her eyes met his, pleading for him to understand. "Something changed. I didn't expect to feel anything, but with you." The tension between them was palpable, a tangled knot of emotions that words could not unravel. Evan's hand slipped from hers, and the sense of loss was immediate, like a wound that cut deeper than any physical pain. "So what happens now?" he asked quietly, his voice laced with a bitterness that stung her. "I don't know," she admitted, her voice breaking. "If I return to them, they'll never let me come back." "Then don't go back." His words were soft, but the desperation in them was clear. "Stay here with me." It was everything she wanted, but fear clawed at her, reminding her of the consequences. "I can't. They would come after me, after us. They won't stop. Then we fight," he replied, determination hardening his gaze. "Whatever it takes. I won't lose you." His words ignited something within her, a defiance she had never known. The idea was reckless, dangerous, yet a part of her thrilled at the thought of breaking free, of carving out a future of her own choosing. As if sensing her resolve, Evan took her hand, his grip firm. "We'll figure it out. Together." Before she could respond, a sudden vibration pulsed through the ground, a low hum that grew in intensity. She recognized it immediately. Her people's technology, a signal of their impending arrival. "They're here," she murmured, dread pooling in her stomach. Evan's grip tightened, his gaze steely. "Then let's go." They took off down the hillside, adrenaline propelling them forward as they raced through the darkened city streets. Behind them, a shimmer of light illuminated the sky, and she knew her people were searching, their technology capable of tracking her every movement. "Leora," Evan panted, pulling her into a narrow alleyway. "What do we do now?" She glanced around, her mind racing. "We need to get out of the city. They won't risk exposure in heavily populated areas." "Then let's go," he said, determination etched into his features. Together, they navigated the labyrinth of streets, their footsteps echoing through the silence. But just as they reached the city's edge, a piercing light flooded the alley, casting elongated shadows against the walls. "Leora," a voice echoed, cold and commanding. She recognized it instantly, the voice of her superior. "Your mission is over. Return to us, and we may be lenient." She froze, the weight of duty and fear pressing down on her. But then Evan's hand found hers, his grip a silent reminder of the choice before her. "No," she called out, her voice steady, defiant. "I'm not going back." There was a pause, and then the voice hardened. "Then you leave us no choice." A blinding flash erupted, and Evan pulled her close, shielding her as the light engulfed them. For a heartbeat, she thought it was over, that they had lost. But then the light faded, and they found themselves standing alone, the alley empty, her people gone. They left," Evan murmured, bewildered. She looked around, a sense of disbelief settling over her. "They must have decided I wasn't worth it." But deep down, she knew the truth. Her people would return, perhaps not now, but eventually. She would always be marked, always hunted. Yet, in this moment, with Evan by her side, she felt something she had never felt before: freedom. "Are you ready?" he asked, a hint of a smile breaking through his somber expression. She took a deep breath, nodding. "Yes, let's start again. Together." And as they walked into the night, hand in hand, Leora knew that whatever lay ahead, it was a journey she would no longer face alone.